The billionaire widower's baby was screaming on the plane until a silent woman did the unexpected. Before we begin this story, tell me where you're watching from and rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments. Enjoy the story. Arthur Kensington, a man of impeccable appearance, but with eyes sunken with exhaustion. He wears an expensive suit, now wrinkled and with a small milk stain on the shoulder. In his lap, little Lily, just 6 months old, cries incessantly. The crying isn't a whim, it's a sharp scream of pure pain. The sound cut through the sterile and silent atmosphere of first class like a blade. Passengers in their leather seats, accustomed to the soft hum of the engine and the clinking of champagne glasses, cast glances that ranged from irritation to pure hostility. Arthur, the man who intimidated competitors with a simple raise of an eyebrow, was completely lost. He tried everything. He rocked his daughter with an uncomfortable stiffness, whispered words that were lost in her cries, offered a bottle that was violently refused. The frustration on his face was a crack in his facade of power, revealing a man broken by grief and overwhelmed by single fatherhood. Each of Lily's sobs was an echo of the absence of her late wife, the only one who would have known exactly what to do. The atmosphere was heavy, laden with judgment, and Arthur felt the weight of each gaze like an accusation. He was a failure there at 30,000 feet. In the back of the cabin, through the curtain that separates first class from economy, in a cramped window seat sits Clara Evans. She is the opposite of everything first class represents, simple, dressed in modest clothes, almost shrinking to not take up space. Her eyes, however, are experienced and analytical. While other passengers put on headphones and huffed, she watched the scene with an empathy that consumed her. To her, that cry was not an annoyance, it was a diagnosis. A pediatric nurse by training and a nanny by necessity, she recognized the signs immediately. The tucked-in little legs, the red face, the way the cry rose and fell in waves of agony. It was colic, and a very bad case of it. Clara was running from her own hell, an abusive family from which she had escaped with nothing but a suitcase of old clothes and a one-way plane ticket to a city where she knew no one. The last thing she wanted was to draw attention. Her instinct was to remain invisible, to survive. But the sound of that child's suffering and the sight of that helpless father activated something stronger than her fear. Clara takes a deep breath, a silent decision made in her expression. She stands up and walks with hesitant but firm steps towards first class. The flight attendant intercepts her, but Clara just points to the billionaire and says in a low voice, "I think I can help." Arthur looks at her with suspicion, but the desperation in his eyes makes him yield. He hands over little Lily, almost as if passing on a burden. The moment Clara took the baby, the energy shifted. Her hands were skilled, confident. She didn't rock her. Instead, she performed a specific movement, a simple trick she had learned over years of practice. She rested Lily's belly on her forearm, the baby's head in the crook of her elbow, and applied gentle pressure while rocking slowly. It was almost like magic. In less than a minute, Lily's screams turned into sobs, then into a deep sigh, and finally, silence. The peace that settled in the cabin was so sudden and total that it seemed palpable. Arthur watched her, dumbfounded. The gratitude on his face was overwhelming, a wave of relief that left him speechless. Clara, however, did not wait for thanks. As soon as Lily fell fast asleep in her arms, she gently returned her to her father and with a shy smile hurried back to her seat in the obscurity of economy class, disappearing as quickly as she had appeared.
Arthur Kensington, at 36, had built an empire from nothing, a titan of the tech industry whose authority was undisputed in any boardroom. He was a man accustomed to having absolute control over everything. everything, except for the tiny being crying in his arms. He had no idea that this encounter, at 30,000 feet, was about to destroy and rebuild his world. The quiet she brought was just the prelude to the biggest storm of his life. Arthur, watching the curtain sway as Clara returned to her seat, looks down at his daughter, sleeping serenely in his lap, and a look of determination takes over his face. For him, loose ends were unacceptable. In his business, every action generated a calculated reaction. Every favor was a debt to be recorded. And the woman who had given him back his peace amidst the chaos could not simply disappear back into anonymity. The gratitude he felt was something primal, overwhelming, and it demanded a response. He didn't know it, but it wasn't just gratitude that moved him. It was an intense curiosity about the woman who, with a simple gesture, had shown more competence than his entire team of assistants and staff. Minutes later, Arthur, with Lily still asleep in a luxury sling against his chest, steps through the curtain. The contrast is immediate. He leaves the spacious and quiet sanctuary of first class and enters the cramped and noisy environment of economy. His presence there is an anomaly. People stare at him, recognizing the famous billionaire from the news. He ignores the stares and finds Clara, who is looking out the window, lost in her own thoughts. He stops beside her seat. "Excuse me." Clara turns, surprised. Seeing him there in her territory makes her visibly uncomfortable. She shrinks, as if wanting to take up even less space. Clara, "Sir? Is the baby okay?" Arthur, "She's perfect. Thanks to you. I didn't get a chance to thank you properly. My name is Arthur Kensington." Clara, forcing a small smile. "Clara Evans. I just did what anyone with a little experience would do." But Arthur knew that wasn't true. He had dozens of people in his life, paid to have experience, and none of them would have acted with such calm and intuition. He felt a need to repay her, to balance the scales. That's how his world worked. "Arthur, I disagree. What you did was extraordinary. Please, accept this as a small token of my gratitude." He holds out a black, no-limit credit card, a gesture that for him was as natural as breathing. For Clara, it was an insult. Her eyes harden, and for the first time, Arthur sees a glint of pride and a hint of pain in them. "I appreciate it, Mr. Kensington, but I can't accept that. I didn't do it for money. I did it for your daughter. Excuse me." She turns back to the window, ending the conversation. Arthur is paralyzed for a moment. It was the first time in years that someone had refused something he offered. Her refusal didn't offend him. It intrigued him deeply. She didn't want his money. So what did she want? Who was this woman who, with a simple gesture, had shown more competence than his entire team of assistants and staff? The plane lands. The sound of the fasten seatbelt sign turns off. Arthur waits patiently as all the first-class passengers disembark. He remains in his seat until economy class begins to move. He knows that if he loses sight of her in the crowded terminal, he will never find her again. The thought gives him a strange and uncomfortable sense of urgency. In the chaos of disembarking, amidst hundreds of anonymous faces, Arthur could only see one. He spotted her near the baggage carousel, waiting for a single, worn-out suitcase that seemed to hold everything she owned in the world. He approached, this time with a different, more human approach. "Arthur. Miss Evans?" "Clara." She turns, her expression of surprise mixed with exhaustion. "I know the flight was long and you probably just want to leave, but I would feel terrible if I didn't thank you with more than a rushed conversation. May I buy you a coffee?" Maybe it was the way he held his daughter, or the genuine sincerity in his eyes, but Clara saw something beyond the powerful billionaire. She saw a widowed father, overwhelmed and grateful. And for the first time in a long time, she felt that being seen was not a danger. She agreed with a nod. Sitting at a small table in a generic airport cafe, the barrier between them began to dissolve. He asked about her experience with children, and she spoke briefly about her work as a pediatric nurse. "You have a gift. It's obvious. Your family must be very proud." At the word family, a shadow crosses Clara's face. She looks away at the coffee cup in her hands. Her voice almost a whisper. "I don't have a family anymore. I'm here to start over. I don't have a place to stay or a job waiting for me. Just a little hope that things can be different." Her confession hung in the air, fragile and laden with a pain that Arthur understood well. Her vulnerability was not a weakness. It was a testament to her immense strength and resilience. She wasn't asking for help. She was just stating her reality. And it was in that moment that a bold, impulsive, and absolutely insane idea began to form in Arthur's mind. An idea that could be the solution to both of their problems, or the beginning of a complication he could never have foreseen. The worst was yet to come.
He saw Clara's situation not with pity, but with the logic of a strategist. She needed security and a new beginning. He desperately needed someone he could trust with the most precious thing in his life. The solution seemed so obvious, so perfectly symmetrical, that ignoring it would be illogical. But the proposal he was about to make transcended business logic. It was an act of instinct, a leap in the dark that his grieving heart compelled him to take. "Clara, this might seem sudden, but I'd like to make you a job offer. I've been looking for a nanny for Lily since, well, for a while. I've been through agencies, interviewed candidates with impeccable resumes, but none of them had what I saw in you today." Clara stares at him, her eyes wide with shock and suspicion. She opens her mouth to speak, but he continues, anticipating her objections. "I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a position, a formal job. You would be Lily's nanny full-time. You would have your own room, complete privacy, and a salary that reflects the importance of the role. I need someone who sees my daughter as a person, not as a task, and you've already proven you do that. Think about it, Clara. A safe place to live, a stable job, a chance to build the new life you came here to find." Clara's mind was spinning. It was too good to be true. Coming from a world where every gesture of kindness came with a terrible price, her first reaction was fear. What did this powerful man really want in return? But then she looked at little Lily, sleeping peacefully in her father's lap, and saw the sincerity in his gaze. It was the look of a desperate father, not a predator. The offer was a lifeline in an ocean of uncertainty. With her heart pounding, caught between suspicion and a lack of options, she accepted in a voice that was barely a whisper. Arthur Kensington's house was not a home. It was a monument to his wealth, and more recently, to his pain. Every piece of art, every designer furniture item seemed untouched, covered by a thin layer of grief. It was into this world that Clara was brought. The contrast with her previous life could not have been more stark. She was given a suite of rooms more luxurious than any place she had ever lived, but she felt like a stranger in a museum. However, the moment she held Lily in her arms inside the nursery, the world around her disappeared. There, in that small universe, she was in her element. She quickly established a routine, filling the silence of the house with soft lullabies and the sound of Lily's laughter. She didn't just care for the baby, she nurtured her with an affection and dedication the house hadn't seen in a long time. Arthur watches from afar. From his home office, through glass walls, he sees her in the garden with Lily. He sees her calming the baby in the middle of the night through the baby monitor. He sees her competence, her kindness, her resilience in action. And slowly, he begins to feel something he hadn't felt in months, a spark of peace. He maintains his emotional distance, barricaded behind his grief and his pride,
but his admiration for her grows with each passing day. Weeks turn into a month. The dynamic between them begins to change, subtly. They stop being just boss and employee and become two adults, sharing a roof and the care of a child. Living together forced an intimacy that neither of them expected. It started with small things. Sometimes Arthur would come to the kitchen for a late-night coffee and find her there, reading a book. The conversations were short, about Lily's day, about the weather, but in these quiet moments, a connection was forming. He started making a point of having lunch at home, something he hadn't done in months, just to spend a few minutes in the peaceful presence she and his daughter created together. On a sunny Saturday, he took them to a park. As he watched Clara push Lily on the swing, a genuine smile on her face, Arthur felt a tightness in his chest. It was a confusing feeling, a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and something more, something he dared not name. He feared his feelings were just a reflection of his loneliness, a product of his gratitude. He didn't want her to think he saw her as a replacement, or that he was taking advantage of her vulnerability. And so he kept his distance, creating a silent and almost unbearable tension between them. The routine they established was safe, professional. But beneath the surface of daily life, something dangerous and undeniable was beginning to grow, and both knew that the fragile balance they had built could not last forever. It's nighttime. The house is silent. Arthur is in his office, trying to concentrate on charts and financial reports, but his mind is elsewhere. He gets up and goes to the kitchen for a glass of water. As he passes the hallway leading to the living room, he hears a low sound and stops. It's Clara's voice. He approaches without making a sound and sees her sitting on the rug with Lily in her lap. They are looking at a large picture frame on the shelf, a photo of Arthur with his late wife Sarah, both smiling happily. Clara, in a sweet voice, as if telling a secret to the baby. "And this was your mummy, my dear. Her name was Sarah. She had the most beautiful smile, don't you think? Look, your eyes are just like hers. She loved you so, so much, more than anything in this world. And your daddy, he loved her very much too. That's why he seems so sad sometimes. But he loves you too, Lily. You're the little piece of her that stayed with him." Arthur leans against the wall, hidden in the shadows, feeling the air leave his lungs. A wave of emotion hits him with the force of a tidal wave. No one, not even he, dared to speak of Sarah so naturally, so vividly.
Clara wasn't just taking care of his daughter. She was honoring his wife's memory, preserving a mother's legacy for a daughter who would never know her. In that instant, his perception of her changes irreversibly. It was no longer admiration. It was not just gratitude. What Arthur felt was something much deeper, something that scared him. He felt drawn to this woman's soul, to her compassion, to her silent strength. He wanted her in his life, not just as his daughter's nanny, but as something more. But how could he act? He, the powerful billionaire, she, his employee, a woman who was there out of necessity. Any advance on his part would seem like exploitation, an abuse of the power dynamic. He felt trapped between the overwhelming desire to get closer and the paralyzing fear of doing the wrong thing, of tainting the purity of what she represented in his home. And so he remained silent, retreating into the shadows, his heart at war with itself. The next day, Clara is in the garden, pushing Lily on a swing. The sun is shining, the breeze is gentle, but inside, Clara feels a storm brewing. She feels safe, perhaps for the first time in her entire life. Arthur's house has become a refuge.
Lily has become the light of her days, and Arthur has become a dangerous complication for her heart. Safety has a price. When you're no longer fighting to survive, there is space to feel. And Clara was feeling too much. She saw the man behind the billionaire, the dedicated father who read market reports with his daughter sleeping on his chest, the widower who looked at his wife's photo with a pain that seemed physical, the kind boss who always treated her with a respect she had never known. She was falling in love with him, and that feeling terrified her. The camera focuses on her face, on her distant and worried gaze. Her internal monologue is revealed. What are you doing, Clara? He's your boss. He lives in a world you can't even imagine. You're the nanny, a temporary piece in his life. He gave you a roof, security, and you dare to feel this? He could never see you as anything more than the girl who calmed his daughter on a plane. This is a fantasy, a dangerous fantasy that will only hurt you. You have to stop. You have to build a higher wall. She makes a decision to protect herself, to maintain the dignity of the position that saved her life. She needs to pull away. She starts avoiding lunches, being strictly professional in her conversations, creating a subtle but deliberate distance. Both had built walls around their hearts, believing that distance was the only form of protection. But they were about to discover that certain feelings, once they take root, cannot be contained. And the attempt to deny them would only make the explosion inevitable. What she didn't know was that an unexpected event was about to shatter all the walls and force them to confront the truth in a brutal way. In the silent war they waged against their own hearts, Arthur and Clara became strangers under the same roof. The distance she imposed hurt him, and the sadness in his eyes broke her inside. They lived in a limbo of forced professionalism, unaware that fate doesn't care about walls or barriers. It was about to give them a real reason to fear, a trial by fire that would burn away all their defenses and reveal the truth of their feelings in the most brutal way possible. The worst was yet to come. It's late afternoon. Arthur, feeling restless and unable to concentrate on work because of Clara's growing distance, decides to go home early. He enters the mansion expecting the soft sound of Clara's voice or Lily's babbling. Instead, he is met with absolute silence, a heavy, abnormal silence that makes his skin crawl. "Clara?" No answer. He walks quickly through the house. The nursery is empty. Clara's room, impeccable, is also empty. There's no note, no sign of where they went. Arthur's heart begins to pound uncontrollably. He grabs his phone, dials her number. It rings and goes to voicemail. Panic hits him with full force. The mind of a man accustomed to controlling all variables collapses. Her distance over the last few days, the sadness in her eyes. His mind creates terrible scenarios. Had she abandoned him? Had her abusive family found her and taken her along with his daughter? The worst hypothesis, the most poisonous one, forms in his thoughts. Had she kidnapped Lily? The idea is illogical, contrary to everything he knows about her. But fear is not rational. The anguish suffocates him. He, the powerful Arthur Kensington, is about to fall apart in the middle of his empty living room when one of the house staff, the housekeeper, finds him, pale and with frightened eyes. "Mr. Kensington." "Thank God you're here. Something terrible happened." Grabbing her shoulders, desperate. "Where is my daughter? Where did she take her?" "No, sir. She didn't take her. She saved her. Little Lily, she choked on a piece of a toy. She was turning purple. She couldn't breathe. Miss Clara didn't hesitate for a second. While we all panicked, she acted. She performed a maneuver with a calm and otherworldly calm. The driver took them to the hospital to make sure everything was okay. "She saved your daughter's life, sir." The words hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. His daughter almost died, and Clara, the woman he suspected, was the hero of the story. Arthur drives to the hospital like a madman, the world outside a blur of lights and sounds. His mind is a whirlwind of guilt, fear, and a gratitude so immense it hurts. He bursts into the pediatric emergency room, and a nurse directs him to an observation room. He stops at the door, afraid of what he will find, and then he sees her. The scene that unfolds before him breaks him into a million pieces. Clara is sitting in an armchair under the dim light of the room. Lily is sleeping deeply on her chest, safe and at peace. Clara's face is pale with exhaustion. There are deep dark circles under her eyes, but her expression is one of absolute serenity. One of her hands rests protectively on Lily's back, rising and falling with the baby's gentle breath. There is no chaos, there is no panic, there is only peace, a peace that she created, that she protected with her own strength. He enters the room silently. She looks up, and her eyes are full of exhaustion, but also relief. She forces a small smile. "She's fine. The doctor said she's perfect. I'm so sorry, I should have called, but everything happened so—" "No, don't apologize. He stops, unable to form the words. In that moment, all his barriers, all his pride, all his grief and fear disintegrate. He no longer sees the nanny, the employee, the woman he rescued. He sees the woman who rescued his daughter, the woman who brought light back into his dark house, the woman he loves. It is an epiphany, an absolute and terrifying certainty. In that sterile hospital room, Arthur Kensington understood everything. He knew what he felt, with a clarity that shook his world, but the realization left him paralyzed. How could he speak of love now, with her so exhausted, so vulnerable, after such a traumatic event? She would think he was taking advantage of the situation, that his gratitude had turned into an opportunistic passion. He felt like a coward, unable to express the strongest emotion he had ever felt. "Thank you, Clara. There are no words for what you did. Thank you." He remained standing, at a safe distance, his hands in his pockets so they wouldn't betray his desire to touch her. His gaze, however, envelops her with an intensity that leaves her unsettled. He loved her, but for fear of trapping her, he remained silent.
A few days have passed since the hospital incident. The atmosphere in the house has changed. The deliberate distance has been replaced by a strange mix of reverence from Arthur and a shy discomfort from Clara. Arthur is in the back of his luxury sedan, on his way to a meeting. He looks out the window but doesn't see the city go by. His mind is back in that hospital room. The traumatic event had broken the ice between them, but the waters running beneath were still dangerous and unknown. Arthur was more pensive than ever, reliving the panic and relief of that day. Lost in thought, he sighs and says aloud, more to himself than to anyone else, "I honestly don't know what would have happened if she hadn't been there." George, his longtime driver, a man with graying hair and a wise gaze, hears the comment. He has known Arthur for years, seen his marriage, his success, his pain. He decides to take a risk. "Mr. Kensington, if you'll permit my boldness, I think Miss Clara feels the same way about being there. It's not just a job for her." Arthur turns slowly, surprised by the observation. "What do you mean by that, George?" "I see the way she looks at you when she thinks no one is paying attention. It's not the look of an employee to her boss. It's different. With all due respect, sir, I think a man like you who can read a boardroom knows exactly what I'm talking about. Sometimes the biggest opportunities aren't on the stock market." George's observation hits Arthur unexpectedly. He had always been so focused on his own fear, on the power dynamic, that he had barely allowed himself to consider the most terrifying and exciting possibility of all, that his feelings might be reciprocated. The seed of doubt or hope was planted. This new perspective didn't make his decision any easier, but it made it infinitely more complex. From that moment on, every gesture, every look exchanged between him and Clara would take on a new and heavy meaning. Hope is a dangerous seed. Once planted, it grows in silence, transforming the landscape of the soul. For Arthur, the possibility that Clara felt the same made him hyper-aware of every moment they spent together. He began to look for signs, for confirmation in her glances, making their life together an even more complex and electrically charged dance. He just didn't imagine that this same hope would lead him to push the situation to the breaking point. It's the end of another day. Clara is in the kitchen, her back to the entrance, preparing Lily's bottle for the night. She is humming a soft melody, absorbed in her routine. Arthur enters the kitchen, moving silently, lost in his own thoughts about what George said. He stops a few feet from her, just watching her, appreciating the scene of peaceful domesticity. Clara. His voice, sudden in the silence, startles her. She gives a small jump, and the knife she was using to cut a piece of fruit slips, making a superficial but painful cut on her finger. A small cry of pain escapes her lips. Ow! Arthur, moving forward quickly. My God, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. Let me see that. Before she can protest, he gently guides her to the sink, turns on the faucet, and holds her hand under the cold water. His touch is firm, yet gentle. He gets the first aid kit from a cabinet, his businessman's efficiency now focused on caring for that small wound. As he cleans the cut and applies a bandage, their faces are very close. The world seems to shrink around them. They look at each other, and in that silence the electricity is almost unbearable. It's a warm look, full of unasked questions and feared answers. Neither one of them says anything about what's really happening, but they both feel it. As soon as the bandage is in place, Clara pulls her hand back, breaking the contact, her heart racing. Thank you. It was nothing. She turns away, ending the moment, but the tension remains in the air, thicker than ever.
It's a radiant Sunday. Determined to break the professional barriers, Arthur suggests a picnic in the park. He arranges everything from a gourmet basket to a cashmere blanket. The scene is the picture of family happiness. Arthur, relaxed and smiling, Clara, beautiful in the sunlight, and Lily giggling on the grass. On the surface, it was perfect, a Sunday dream. But for Clara, that perfection was torture. Every smile from Arthur, every moment their shoulders touched while they played with Lily, was a reminder of the chasm that separated them. That happiness seemed like a glimpse of a world to which she would never belong. She was the nanny, an employee living a paid fantasy, and with every laugh, the guilt and pain in her chest grew. While Arthur pushes Lily on a swing, Clara watches him from a distance. The decision solidifies in her heart with the clarity of pain. Clara, voiceover. This isn't real, Clara, and it's not fair. It's not fair to him, it's not fair to his wife's memory, and it's not fair to you. You have to end this before your heart breaks in a way that can't be fixed. The next night, Arthur comes home early. He is determined. After the picnic, he feels he needs to somehow show her that his feelings are real. He enters the mansion, and again, silence greets him. A familiar panic hits him. But this time, the fear was different. It wasn't fear for his daughter, but the fear of losing the woman who had become the center of his universe. He runs up the stairs and goes straight to her room. The door is ajar, and the sight destroys him. Clara is standing next to an open suitcase on the bed, folding her clothes with silent tears streaming down her face. Arthur, his voice choked. What are you doing? Clara turns, her face marked by pain. Seeing the anguish on his face almost makes her falter, but she stands firm. "I'm so sorry, Arthur. I got another job. I have to leave." "Leave? Why? If it's about money, I can—" Interrupting him, her voice trembling. "It's not about money. It's about this, about us. I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend I'm just your employee when what I feel for you grows every day. It's unbearable. And I know you're a good man, but you could never see me as anything more than the nanny, the maid you helped. And I can't live like this, loving someone in silence." Every word she says is a stab to Arthur's heart. He is devastated, paralyzed. All his fears, all his insecurities were wrong. The problem wasn't him taking advantage of her. It was her feeling that she would never be enough for him. He realizes with a desperate clarity that his house, his life, his future, none of it makes sense without her. The fear of losing her finally becomes greater than his fear of declaring himself. "Don't go. I have to." "No, you don't understand. Staying silent was the stupidest thing I've ever done." He stops in front of her, and for the first time, he lets all his vulnerability show. "I'm falling in love with you too, Clara. I resisted it, fought against it with all my strength, because I thought it wasn't fair to you, to your situation. I thought you would think I was just trying to fill a void. But the truth is, you didn't fill a void. You created a new space inside me, one I didn't know existed. You didn't just save my daughter, you saved me. Your presence has transformed this house from a mausoleum into a home. Losing you is not an option, because without you, there's nothing left here." He finishes his confession, his heart laid bare. The fate of both of them hangs in the air, depending on her next word. His words hung in the silence of the room, not as a request, but as a surrender. The truth, once freed, has a weight of its own, and Clara felt that weight land on her shoulders, undoing years of fear and self-deprecation. The man before her was not the billionaire, the boss, the savior. He was just Arthur, a man whose broken heart seemed to recognize hers. A kiss that rewrote everything. Seeing the last shadow of uncertainty in her eyes, Arthur knew that words were no longer enough. He took the final step that separated them and, with a reverent delicacy, placed his hands on her face. His palms were warm against her skin, and his thumbs wiped away her tears. And then he kissed her. The kiss was not gentle. It was a kiss of restrained passion, of weeks of silent desire, of desperation and relief. It was a kiss that said everything words couldn't. For a moment, Clara remained rigid, but the warmth and sincerity of that gesture melted her last resistance. She gave in, her arms wrapping around his neck, responding with the same hungry intensity. As he kissed her, he held her tightly, one of his hands sliding from her back to her waist, a possessive and yet adoring gesture. A burning desire, suppressed for so long, finally took over. With a fluid movement, he lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing, and carried her to the bed. There, under the soft glow of the lamp, he laid her gently on the sheets. Every movement was slow, deliberate. His eyes never left hers as he, with trembling hands, began to undress not just her clothes, but years of fear and invisibility. Every kiss he placed on her neck, on her shoulders and down her stomach was a promise. For Clara, it was unknown territory. She had never felt so seen, so adored. Her body tingled and trembled, not from fear, but from a pleasure so intense it was almost unbearable. That night, they didn't just make love intensely, they rewrote their stories. In a total surrender of body and soul, the widowed billionaire and the runaway Manny became simply Arthur and Clara, two halves of the same soul that had finally found their way home. A few days later,
Morning floods the master suite of the mansion. Arthur and Clara are in bed, watching little Lily play in a playpen set up in the room. The atmosphere is one of domesticated peace and intimacy, something the house had never known before. The days that followed were a dream from which neither of them wanted to wake. The tension was gone, replaced by an easy tenderness, by laughter and stolen touches in the hallways. Clara was no longer an employee. She was the queen of that castle, the heart of that home. Arthur, for his part, had never seemed so light, so complete. Arthur turns to Clara, his gaze serious, but filled with a calm and secure love. He takes her hand. I spent the first part of my life building an empire, thinking that's what success meant. And the second part, grieving, thinking I would never feel anything again. And then you showed up and taught me that everything I had built was just an empty shelter. You and Lily are my true empire, Clara. You are my home. He slides out of bed and kneels beside her. From his bedside table, he takes a small velvet box. Clara's eyes fill with tears once more, but now they are tears of pure happiness. I don't want another day without you, not as my lover or as the woman who lives in my house. I want you as my wife, my partner, my equal in everything. Clara Evans. Would you do me the honor of marrying me? With a smile that lights up the entire room, Clara throws herself into his arms. Yes, yes, forever, yes.
2 years later, the interior of a luxurious private jet. Arthur and Clara Kensington are sitting across from each other. Clara, now with an aura of confidence and happiness, is reading a story to Lily, who, at 2.5, listens attentively in her mother's lap. Arthur isn't reading reports or looking at his laptop. He is just watching his 2 girls, a serene smile on his face. Destiny sometimes has a sense of poetic irony. It all began on a plane, amidst chaos, tension, and judgmental stares, and now there they were, at 30,000 feet once again. But the chaos had turned into peace, the tension into love, and the judgments had become irrelevant. Clara was no longer the invisible woman shrinking by the window. She was the sun around which Arthur's world now revolved, and he was no longer the broken billionaire, but simply a husband and a father whose greatest asset was the family he never knew he was looking for. Lily points to the plane window, at the vast carpet of white clouds below them. "Mommy, look, clouds!" Clara smiles and kisses the top of her daughter's head. Her gaze meets Arthur's over the child. It's a look that carries universes of meaning. The memory of their meeting, the hardships, the confession, the surrender, and the promise of an infinite future. Their story was not a fairy tale. It was proof that the most unlikely encounters can lead to the most extraordinary destinies. Proof that sometimes a heart needs to be shattered to be able to open up and let love in. And as the plane flew towards the sunset, one thing was certain. The baby who once cried uncontrollably had found a mother. The man who had lost everything had found his world. And the silent woman who just wanted to disappear had finally found her voice, her place, and her love. And this was only the beginning. The camera slowly pulls back, showing the family united against the window, as the private jet flies towards a golden horizon. The soft music swells, and the screen fades to black. What did you think of this ending for Arthur and Clara's story? Were you moved by their journey? Leave your opinion here in the comments. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and don't forget to leave a like. See you next time.